Hello viewers, good to see you at this time. Today we are looking at some likely JAMB government questions. Please settle down and come with me. We are starting with this question. Niger sovereignty is acquired through, when we talk about sovereignty, we have types of sovereignty, and one of them is Niger. Law, grant, treaty, force. Niger has to do with acquiring political power through a democratic process, particularly through election. And the opposite of Niger is de facto, by force, especially the military. So the correct answer to this question is acquiring power, sovereignty, through what? Law. Option A. The next question. The policy of assimilation was a colonial policy of the, of course, this is popular policy of the French. This was the first policy or the principle adopted by the French colonial government at the initial stage of their colonialism of all their colonies, particularly in West Africa, the 9 of them. But as time went on after the Second World War, as the colonies were pressing for freedom, for liberty, for independence, this policy was changed to association principle. So the correct answer for this question is option A, the French colonial administration. The next question. The policy of indigenization was introduced under the regime of Yakubu Gowon, Olusegun Obasanjo, Ibrahim Babangida, Sani Abacha. The correct answer to this question is Yakubu Gowon. I think this policy was introduced around 1972, while Yakubu Gowon was the head of state. And the policy was aimed at encouraging Nigerians, indigenous, to own businesses or to be part of the existing foreign businesses in Nigeria. This policy was very unique so as to prevent the foreigners from controlling or dominating the economy of Nigeria. Option A is the correct answer. The next question. Professor Ibrahim Gambari was the special assistant to the United Nations Secretary General on security matters, African affairs, political and social matters, the Economic Commission of Africa. The answer to this question is option B. This man stayed in that office for a very long time, African affairs. And during the late head of state, Boye, Muhammadu Buhari, also brought this old man back to as a special advisor towards the end of his tenure a few years back. Option B is the correct answer. The next question. In a democratic system, what happened? Majority votes, legal sovereignty shouldn't be unquestionable, electoral college is always necessary, minority votes, but majority rule. You know everything about democracy is what? Majority carry the votes. So it's majority rule. Minority vote, but majority eventually will rule. Everybody is ruling through our representative. That's democracy, modern democracy, indirect democracy. Option D is the correct answer. Unicameral legislatures are popular in, that's a type of legislature. We have 2 types of legislature, unicameral and of course bicameral. A unicameral is when we have only one chamber for lawmaking, while in bicameral we have 2 chambers or houses for making laws. So in this case, among this system of government, which of them is attracted by unicameralism? The answer is unitary system. Because in unitary system, there's concentration of political power in the hand of one strong central government. So you can see it's adoptable using unicameral legislature. Option A is the correct answer. Okay, we answered this earlier. A bill that applies to the whole population and is intended to promote general welfare is called what? we have three major types of bills in government under the legislative arm of government. We have the public or government bill, we have the private or ordinary bill, and we have the appropriation or money bill. Here we are talking about the bill that is involving the government and is affecting what? The generality of the populace. Is it a private member bill, a decree, or decree is an off option in this place because the decree is associated with the military government. An appropriation bill, a public bill. The correct answer is a public bill, also known as what? A government bill. Most of the government bill has to do directly with the welfare of the people. Option D is the correct answer. The legislature checks the SSCs of the executive through appointments of civil servants, screening of governors, scrutiny of the budget, nomination of judges. Of course, though we have separation of power, which was promoted by Baron de Montesquieu, that the three organs of government, legislature, executive, and judiciary, should be separated in terms of personnel and, of course, their functions. Okay, but there's another principle that contradicts as well as complements that particular statement, and that principle is checks and balances. In other words, these three organs of government should be given three special powers by which they can check one another to prevent abusive use of power. Okay, and that is why this kind of question could come up. So a special power was given to the legislature to check the other two organs of government, and that power is known as what? The Act of Parliament. And by this Act of Parliament, the legislature makes demand on the executive to submit the proposed budget for the year unto them, and they scrutinize this budget, and eventually they could pad the budget. They could either cut off or increase the budget for the interest of the populace. All right? So the correct answer for this question is scrutiny of the budget. Option C. Ending a session of parliament by royal proclamation means now this royal proclamation here, the mentality we are talking about United Kingdom, either the king or the queen. Okay. Under the parliamentary system of government, the operating or cabinet system, as you may call it. All right? So I want you to get something right here, all right, from these options. We have expiration of parliament, we have prorogation of parliament, we have adjournment of parliament, we have dissolution of parliament. Apart from A, because a parliament don't expire, is a wrong word to use. Apart from A, the other three options are applicable in a parliament as far as parliament is concerned, in the parliamentary system of government as far as parliament is concerned, and they're also related to the royal proclamation. All right? For instance, when we say adjournment has to do with when the legislative assembly is having a discussion on a particular subject or a bill, and they look at the time available not enough for them to finish their discourse on that bill, such meeting could be adjourned. Such discourse can be adjourned to another meeting day. That's an adjournment, also applicable. All right? Then we also have what they call prorogation. Prorogation is the end of a session of a parliament. We call it prorogation, end of a session of a parliament. We also have what they call dissolution of the parliament. This is the end of the term of a parliament. There's a difference between end of a session and end of a term. End of a session is like the end of the year, when they are closing for the year, all right, for the current governmental year, all right? But when you talk about dissolution, it's talking about end of their tenure, maybe 4 years, maybe 5 years. At that point, at dissolution, the parliament will be dissolved and there will be a call for a general election. But at a prorogation, it's just the end of the session, and the new session will commence at a date after their recess. Okay? So the correct answer to this particular question is prorogation of parliament. Option B. Let's see the next question. Nigeria's top contribution to Africa's agenda of decolonization and anti-racism was mostly enhanced with the formation of the New Partnership for African Development, NEPAD, B, Organization of African Unity, OAU, C, ECOWAS, and D, OPEC. Now, looking at NEPAD is a modern ideology that came up in the course of discussion of transforming OAU to become AU. That was in the year 2000, okay, as moved by some African leaders, including the late Mama Gaddafi, all right, of Libya, right, and that of South Africa, okay. Now, but this is the latest development in Africa, right? But the one we are talking about the time of the struggle for independence, the fight for the freedom of few African countries that were still under colonization at that time, like Namibia, like Zimbabwe, like Lesotho, all right? So these countries, and also some form of racism that were happening, particularly in South Africa, where there was what? Apartheid. So OAU was a very good platform for Nigeria to express our desire for the love and independence of other countries in Africa. OAU. That is the correct answer, option B. But remember, OAU has given way now to what they call AU, African Union, I think year 2002. The next question. Nigeria's withdrawal from Edinburgh Commonwealth Games in July 1986 was in protest against British not doing what? Failure to impose sanctions on South Africa, negative utterances on Nigeria, supply of arms to Rhodesia. Mind you, Rhodesia is a former name of Zimbabwe, a country besides South Africa in Southern Africa. All right? Support for unitary rebels in Angola. The Nigerian withdrawal was basically because of the refusal of the British government to impose sanctions on South Africa, particularly on the issue of what? Apartheid. You know, apartheid was a long racial discrimination fight in South Africa between the black and the white. And you must have heard about Nelson Mandela, who was arrowhead of the black people fighting for this race, and eventually was in prison for 21 years and came up eventually to become the president of South Africa at the end of apartheid, the struggle between the white and the black in South Africa. So option A is the correct answer. The next question. I hope you're enjoying the class. Please subscribe to this channel and also share the link with your friends so that you can get more from here. Now, the Arrow age grade system, Arrow Chuku is a place in the eastern region of Nigeria among the Igbos. Okay, so the Arrow age grade system in Igbo land was, once you hear the age grade is the groupings of age. People were grouped to different age group or age classes. People that agree together, put themselves together, and they form like an interest group or a pressure group or a peer group. And from there, they contribute to the development of the society, of their community and their villages. All right? So, anytime you see age grid is like a political organization. All right? They form a basis for political expression of the interests of their people. And they also act as a pressure group within their community. Religious organization, commercial organization, political and imperial organization. The answer is option C, a political organization. A major difference between pressure group and political party is that whereas the latter aims at winning power, the former, when we say the latter means the first one that came, the first name that was mentioned, the first mentioned. And which one was the first mentioned? Okay, a political party. Sorry, a pressure group. The latter is the last one, while the former is the first one. The former, as far as this question is concerned, is a pressure group, while the latter is political party. All right? So, whereas the latter aims at winning, in other words, the latter is the political party, aims at winning elections and thereby controlling government apparatus. Okay? But the pressure group, the aim of every pressure group is basically to influence government to support the interests of our members. All right? The pressure group originally or intentionally, they are by principle, they are not interested in election or forming party or contesting for election or becoming part of government. All what they do is to influence government policies, government actions as it affects particularly their members. Okay? And that is why another name for pressure group is what? Interest group. Some quote and unquote, call them selfish group. Why? They are always fighting for themselves, the interests of their members. Okay? So the former, which is the pressure group, ethical government policies, aims at winning election, influencing government policies, nominating potential leaders of government. The answer is option C, influencing government policies. Okay. The Nigerian Independence Constitution was modified by, and what a coincidence, today we are marking the 65th anniversary of Nigeria. So let me tell you, Happy Independence Day. Okay, if you're Nigeria, all right? And if you're not in Nigeria, celebrate with us today. Okay, Nigeria Independent Constitution was modified by in other words, after the Constitution was established, which Constitution came afterwards to change it, to modify it? Huh? That was 1963 Constitution. If you notice, all these options are constitutions in Nigeria. But the one that actually modified the 1960 Constitution was one that followed it. That was 1963 Republican Constitution. The one that actually made Nigeria a federal republic. The one that stopped the Queen being Nigeria head of state. Then Nnamdi Azikiwe became official president of Nigeria. 1963 Republican Constitution. Option C is the correct answer. The highest decision-making body in Nigeria under the British Buhari's military regime was under the military regime in Nigeria since inception in 1966, January 15, that they came to power. The highest ruling body has always been the SMC, the Supreme Military Council. And this one will add under Agui Rossi, the first military of state, under Yakubu Gowon that ruled for 9 years, okay? We also have this under Murtala Mohammed that was assassinated. We have this under Olusegun Obasanjo. We also have this under Buhari, okay? So SMC is answer. Until when Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida came to power, he changed it from SMC to Armed Forces Ruling Council, AFRC. But the answer to this question is option B, Supreme Military Council. But if the question has said Babangida, the answer would be what? Option A. But the question is in Buhari, so the Supreme Military Council. All right? The next question. Rhodesia was the former name, I think I mentioned this in the course of discussing and explaining questions in South Africa. Huh? That is the former name of Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe is a country in Southern Africa. It's a neighbor of South Africa. Take note, South Africa is a country in Southern Africa. Okay? The next question. Which African country experienced a violent resistance movement against British colonial rule, known as the Mau Mau Rebellion? I can't forget this. The Mau Mau Rebellion were the Kenyan people that resisted the British. In fact, they were ambushed. They ambushed British and killed many British officers until when the British officers used higher power to overpower them. Kenya, option B, is the correct answer. Okay. They were the KKU people. They're the one that did this rebellion, KKU people. The next question. The tenure of the President of United Nations Security Council is. I hope you know that Security Council is the most powerful organ of United Nations. Okay? And it's made up of 15 members, out of which 5 of them are permanent. And these 5 permanent members are the superpowers. US, UK, China, of course. The USSR represented by Russia. Okay? And of course, France. So these are the founding members, and they are the what? Permanent members. The remaining 10 members are elected rotationally every 2 years. So the head of this Security Council is elected on a monthly basis. It's a rotational leadership. And basically, they use, I think it's alphabetical order. All right? So once you are there as the president of UN for 1 month, the next one will go in that order, and that's how to rotate it, particularly among the superpowers. All right? Very well. So no one can say he's president of the world or president of the United Nations. You are just the president of the head. You are just the head of an organ, all right, of the United Nations on a monthly basis, every month. The reason why they make it so short and so rotational, so that nobody will assume arbitrary power. Nobody will become so powerful. No country will assume that they are not the president of the United Nations, president of the world. Okay, 1 month, option A. Dash was a method used by the British to facilitate the administration of southern Nigeria. Now, if you're a student of history, you understand that when the British government were colonizing Nigeria, they used what they call initially exclusive proclamation for the northern Nigeria. Exclusive proclamation is a principle whereby the colonial governor, the British colonial governor, gave instructions to the emir in the north on how to govern the northern people. Meanwhile, the British masters were here in the south, particularly in Lagos here, and covering other western areas where they introduced indirect rule. Okay? A situation whereby they use the leaders of the people, traditional rulers of the people, to control the people. That's indirect rule. A form of divide and rule. You understand? Such a way that they use tribes and region and locations to separate the people. You know, for instance, using the Alafio for the Oba of Ibadan as the head of the Yorubas, to rule the Yorubas, and they're using the, what do you call it? For the Igbo people, they appointed warren chiefs to govern them. Some areas like we have Onitsha, we have the Obi of Onitsha, you understand? And some other places like Opobo and the rest of them in the down south there. So this divide and rule, the form of indirect rule system. Option B is the correct answer. The reason why they do that, so that people will not be united in such a way to resist their domination. Divide and rule, indirect rule. The next question. The head of government under the 1979 Constitution is the... Now, you will know that the 1979 Constitution came to be at the exit of the military government of Olusegun Obasanjo, Murtala Olusegun Obasanjo military government. Okay? You know, they were in power, and then they transited. There was a transition of power from the military to civilian. Okay? And that 79 Constitution was introduced, which changed the Nigerian Constitution. Originally, when we got independent, we adopted the Constitution style, the system of the British master, Parliamentary system of government, whereby you have the head of states and, of course, the head of government, the prime minister, two leaders at the same time. But this Constitution changed it to suit the American style and also suit the military style, okay? Where we have one person as a leader and the person known as what? The president. So being the president, you are an executive president. Why? You are the head of state as well as the head of government. So there's no prime minister, rather just an executive president. So the answer here, the head of government was the president, was the president. By assuming the question is rephrased and ask you in 1960 Constitution or 1963 Constitution. If the question says 1960 Constitution or 1963 Constitution, the answer would have been the prime minister, because the prime minister was the head of government in these two constitutions. Why? Because we are operating parliamentary system of government. That is the system of the British style system, okay? But now that we change to American style, the head of government and the head of state is the executive president. Option A is the correct answer. The next question. Price stability in the international oil market is a major objective of the... You'll be surprised to have a question like this in government. This question should be applicable to economists, okay? But you know there's a link between economists and government, especially when we are treating the international organization, like ECOWAS, like OPEC, okay? So this has to do with OPEC. That's Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, okay, OPEC. So OPEC basically help to stabilize prices in oil markets. If you follow the international market, you hear what OPEC, prices, how it changes, or how it's been stabilized. They also regulate the supplies into the markets, so as not to just flood the market, okay? We call it quota system. All these are the functions of OPEC as far as oil is concerned. Option C is the correct answer. The next question. The most effective instrument adopted by Nigeria against the East-West Cold War in the 1960s was, I don't know if you have heard about this Cold War. Cold War was the struggle for domination within the international community in the United Nations. At that time, we have the socialist part and we have the capitalist part. The socialists are known as the Warsaw Pact, while the capitalists are known as what? The NATO. Okay? The socialists were led by USSR then, while the capitalists were led by what? USA. And each one of them had their own allied. Allied are their supporters among the international power blocks. Okay? So this was going on, and I think it's still going on till now. If you trace the war going on now between Russia and Ukraine, you will see it and track it to the decision of Ukraine to want to join NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, under the US. Okay? In other words, moving totally from the Eastern Bloc to the Western Bloc, which Russia did not want to accept that. Okay? So that element of Cold War is still ongoing, but not as strong as at that time, in the earlier time, in the 1960s. Okay? So as at that time, the third world nations, the poor countries, the developing countries of the world, decided that we will support the Warsaw, we will support the NATO. We are going to be a balancer. We'll be at the middle ground. They call it non-alignment movement. So non-alignment movement was formed in the 1960s. Now, okay, as a position to reduce the tension within the international community, especially within the United Nations. Because this developing country will always need the help of both the Eastern region and, of course, the Eastern and the Western region, Western allied, NATO and Warsaw. Okay? So the answer here is non-alignment policy. Nigeria was also a part of non-alignment. So, in fact, in our foreign policy, one of the major objectives of our foreign policy is to be non-aligned. Non-aligned. When we got independence in 1960, we became non-aligned. We are not supporting either of the bloc, whether the Eastern Bloc or the Western Bloc during the Cold War. So the correct option here is option D. The next question. A major achievement of the OAU was the eradication of poverty, establishment of democracy in Africa, declaration of Africa, promotion of development. The answer here is what? Declaration of Africa. As a platform, OAU was used to fight or to resist the continuous domination of the colonial masters. Okay? Decolonization, option C. I hope you enjoyed the class. Subscribe to this channel and please share the link with your friends so that you can learn more from us. Pressure groups are different from political parties. Why? Because we discussed something like this earlier when I was trying to explain to you the difference between pressure group and political party. Where parties are so much interested in contesting for election, the pressure groups are to influence government for the interest of their own members. Okay? So, because they analyze elections, articulate interests, aggregate interests, contest elections. This articulate interest is much, they also aggregate interest. Both political parties and pressure group aggregate interest. But the pressure group, they articulate their own interests, the interests of their people, juxtaposed with government policies and government decisions. So articulate interest, option B, their own interest, the interest of their members. Okay? The next question. The Security Council of the United Nations Organization has, I just explained this earlier, so we want to know waste time here, 5 permanent members. I told you there are 15 in number, 10 of them are not permanent, while 5 are permanent members. And the 5 permanent members are the superpowers, the founding members. Okay? Very well. I mentioned them earlier in the previous question. Option A is the correct answer. The next question. The right of citizens to vote is universal suffrage, nationality suffrage, electoral suffrage, adult suffrage. What is suffrage? Suffrage, another name for it is franchise, means the right of a citizen to vote and be voted for. The right to vote and be voted for. That's what we call suffrage. All right? Now, so the right for citizens, what do you now call it? Rights now. Is it universal suffrage? Is that when you say adult suffrage, only adults are allowed to vote. And they could also be male or female. So the most appropriate word they use now under democracy is universal suffrage. Or you say universal adult suffrage. And what makes it to be an adult? Almost every country, like Nigeria, the attainment of 18 years. And once you attain 18 years, you are assumed to be an adult and you are qualified to vote. So appropriately, it should be universal adult suffrage. So universal suffrage. Option A, that's the right word we use for this purpose. The Murtala Obasanjo regime in Nigeria increased the number of states from, I mentioned this military government earlier, okay? So when we talk about the story, the history of creation of states in Nigeria, the first, we actually started at independence in 1960 with 3 regions, okay? And by 63, when we got Republican, we had 4 regions. Midwestern region was created to join North, West, and East. So we had what? Midwestern region to join them, making 4. That's what we had until 1967, when Yakubu Gowon created the first state, 12 states, the first 12 states. And he attempted that to prevent the Eastern region moving away to form Biafra, led by Odumegu Ojukwu. Okay? So we had these 12 states, even all through the wartime. The war ended in 1970. And of course, when Olusegun Murtala Obasanjo regime came, they added extra 7 states to make it what? 19 states. And from that point, we had other 2 created, making 21 states by Babangida, and then another 9 created by Babangida, making 30 states, and another 6 added by Abacha, making 36 states, the one we have at the moment. So the correct option here is from 12 to 19. From 12 to 19. Okay. The next question. The elective principle was introduced by which constitution? The elective principle was introduced in 1922 by a governor called Clifford. Clifford came to power after Lord Lugard. Lord Lugard actually did not have a constitution because he just had what they call Nigerian Council, which was not gazetted by the British government. So what we had, the first constitution in Nigeria officially was 1922 Clifford Constitution that gave birth to the first election in Nigeria in 1923. But that election was not a general election. It was an election within Lagos and Calabar in ratio 3-1 for the Legislative Council. So the answer here is option B, Clifford Constitution of 1922. Macpherson was 1951, and that one introduced what they call unitarism constitution, a one-chamber legislature at the center. Richard introduced regionalism in 1946. So this region we're talking about, North-West East, was done by Richard Constitution. Littleton introduced federalism in 1944. So Nigeria, being a republic today, federal republic today, was introduced by Littleton Constitution of 1954. So the answer to this question is Clifford's Constitution of 1922, option B. Okay. The main representative body of the United Nations is the, United Nations as international organization has 6 principal organs, okay, apart from many other agencies. Agencies like UNESCO, like UNICEF, like IBROD, like ECOWAS, like ECA and the rest of them. They are agencies. But there are 6 principal organs. 1, we have the General Assembly. 2, we have the Security Council that I mentioned and explained earlier. 3, we have the Secretariat. And 4, we have the ICJ, or you call it International Court of Justice, the World Court. And 5, we have the Trusteeship Council. And lastly, we have the ECOSOC, the Economic and Social Council. Okay, ECOSOC, right? So the one that is most representative, main representative, or most deliberative. Please take note of this adjective. When you see a question as per United Nations organs, the most deliberative, the main representative, the answer is the General Assembly. The General Assembly. But if the question is changed to the most powerful, the supreme, then the answer will be what? The Security Council. Take note of that. But the one that has access power to what? To lay sanctions using veto power is the Security Council. Veto power. But the answer to this particular question here is General Assembly. The General Assembly, option B. Okay? And that happened to be for us today the last question for this session. Please subscribe to this channel. Also share this link with your friends so they can learn from you. And if you have any questions, please send it to us and we'll find time to attend to you. Thank you.
Hi, I'm sure you enjoyed the content you just watched. To see more episodes as that, preparing you for your oncoming exams, smash the subscribe button on this channel right now and visit the playlist that we've made for you, covering over 50 type of different exams, including JAMB, WAEC, Cacao,